I survived my birth, verbal abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, S abuse, and the big R word. I finally overcame the labels that were put on me based off the reputation of my parents. I survived the death of my child, the almost demise of my marriage. I spent my entire youth trying to prove who I am and who I'm not. I had finally found my place where I belonged. I had finally allowed myself to trust people, to reach out and make friends. I had broken down a lot of walls. I was doing what God put on me to do, put on this planet to do. I was using my creative talents at church. I was happy. Things were moving along pretty well. Well, the church lady came along and destroyed my world. It's like she hit me with a sledgehammer between the eyes. She was new to our church. She'd only come once or twice a month. I'm not sure she was even a Christian. She was just started coming to church, her and her family. She never really talked to me very much. We never talked about anything important. She had no clue who I am, what I've been through in my life, what I was going through at that time. But she took it upon herself to diagnose me as depressed. She was not in any position to make that assumption without any facts. She just labeled me. She was in college to be a therapist, so I guess I was her experiment. I had no idea that she was going to be the devil's handyman. She came to my home under the pretense of friendship and Christian love. She did not even come within 4 foot inside my front door. Okay, she didn't even come all the way in my house. I was doing some projects for Vacation Bible School during this time, and my back went out. I had to go to the hospital, get meds, and all that good stuff. I could not walk or even stand up. If I had to use the bathroom, I literally had to crawl on my hands and knees to go to the bathroom. Okay. Sadly, I was doing church projects when this happened. I was in excruciating pain. At this time, my husband was working 12 to 14-hour shifts. He would go to work at midnight during this time so he could come home and help me with the boys when we woke up in the morning. He would help with their breakfast and so forth and get me set up in the recliner so that I could kind of supervise our kids while they played, and he could go back and finish his job. And so he would go back and finish his day. Then he would come home, help with the kids around lunchtime, and then go to bed so he could get up at midnight and do it again. We did this for about 4 or 5 days. I could finally walk. Then I was sore and it was slow go. But anyway, in the midst of all that, this woman showed up at my house. She had no compassion for me, and what she did was not friendship. She decided that my home was dirty. It wasn't clean. For 4 days I couldn't clean it. And my husband wasn't there to clean. Or if he was trying to sleep so he could work. So we were a little behind. So we lived in a very old house. This house is probably nearly 100 years old. It needed new carpet and some other updates. So, we're a low-income family. We couldn't afford, a lot of things. So, anyway, she took it upon herself to decide that she would report me to DHR. Some people call it CPS. Depends on what state you live in. For days, I didn't know who did it because we had welcomed another neighbor into our house. Like I said, I had made some new friends. Things were going well. There was only 2 or 3 people that could have been. My son was terrified. Every time the social worker showed up at our house, he would go hide under the bed because he was terrified this woman was going to take him. Well, thanks to this woman's big mouth, we quickly found out who she was. She went to the church family and all around church and bragged about what she had done. She had the nerve to say that what happened to me was not humiliating, so she was telling me how I was supposed to feel. It wasn't her call to tell me how I was supposed to feel. She thought she was helping me. I was depressed and I needed help from the social workers. I never said anything. I never spoke up for myself. I never tried to defend myself. I just took it. I was knocked down and didn't know how to get back up. I was betrayed. I finally allowed myself to actually trust somebody, and this is what happened. I finally opened myself up, in a way I'd never done before, because I never trusted anybody, and this is what happened when I finally trusted somebody. When the investigator showed up at my door, I had to prove I had water in the house, food, clothes for the kids, and all these other things. I felt like I'd been violated in my own home. I mean, I was curled up in the fetal position and crying because of what this woman did. I cannot imagine anyone would accuse me of neglecting my kids, especially after I had buried my daughter. I know better than most how precious my children are and how important it is to take care of them. And my kids always, always came first, ahead of myself or anything else. And sometimes the dishes would just have to wait because my kid came first. I was humiliated in my own home and in my church family. My son actually had some nightmares after this happened. And I was scared to death that this woman was going to try to snatch my kids away from me. I'd already lost one of my children. I mean, when my son would get a fever, I would pray, Lord, don't let him die. Most people are praying, just help him get well. That was not me. I never knew. Life is fragile. And I lived it that way. Because every moment counts. Playing with my kids and making sure they had what they needed, that was my priority. We couldn't afford new carpet and $1,000 curtains or any of that, but we did the best we could, and our kids were taken care of, even if I went without. I tried to be positive in this situation. I just wanted to put it behind me and move on, but that wasn't possible. Because she went and told everyone what she did, I was publicly humiliated. It spread like wildfire. People in the church stopped talking to us. My oldest son lost his best friend that he used to visit across the street because she was afraid somebody would do that same thing to her. So my son was no longer allowed to play with his friend. For years, he would say, Mom, I miss my friend. It took him a really long time to get over that, and I'm not sure he fully ever did. Kids in my Sunday school class, my son's Sunday school class, started treating him bad. Church is supposed to be a place where you go to feel safe, feel comfort, and love, but that's not what took place for my son. Our kids used to love church. They would wake up on Sunday mornings and rush us out the door. They didn't want us to be late. They did not understand what they did to be treated this way all of a sudden. New friends at church quit talking to us. There was one couple at church that was like an aunt and uncle to our kids. They stopped having anything to do with us all of a sudden. They even babysat the boys for us a couple of times. My boys liked going to their house. These were people I would have asked to raise my sons if I died. I mean, And now all of a sudden they cut all ties with us, barely spoke to us. Chris lost a mentor and a really good friend. That's my husband. I taught children's church. You know, when the big church is going on, children would go to another room and have their own church. And I would help teach that. And one day a girl stood up in the class and said, "Oh, you're the nasty lady that lives in the nasty house up the road from my grandmother." I wanted to die. There were like 15 kids in that room, so I couldn't just run out and leave them. I had to stand there. I had to stand there and just move forward and act like nothing happened until church was over. I now had a file at the DHR office, so I wasn't able to teach anymore. I couldn't work in the nursery anymore. So everything I was doing at church was gone. All the work I was putting in, all the things I were doing was over. I almost stopped going to church altogether. But I was born into this church. I grew up in this church. I was married in this church. My daughter was buried there. What this woman did forever changed my life. Once again, I was slapped with a label I had to live down. Every time I walked through the door of the church, it was a struggle for me because of the whispers and finger pointing. But I didn't have anything to be ashamed of. If I had stopped going, it would have gave credibility to this woman and what she said and did. I didn't do anything wrong. I had nothing to be ashamed of, and I was not, and run away. I wasn't going to run away from it. Every time she opened her mouth to talk to me, it made me feel sick to my stomach. She had no idea what she had done to my kids, to me, to my family. It changed how I parented my sons, and that's on me. I shouldn't have let this was a kick, a hard kick, and I became so obsessed with keeping our house clean, it shifted how I spent time with my sons. And I'm not proud of myself for that, but that's what I did. I had to live with ugly comments. People that had never been to my home before just assumed it was true, what she said. There was a couple of people at the church that had been to her house and said, "No, when I was there, everything was fine." But they didn't pay him much attention. The stress, it caused a lot of stress. I mean, keep in mind, this didn't just happen one day and it was over. This, when DHR starts investigating you, it's over a period of time. So, I no longer trusted anybody. I no longer had any friends, and I didn't even feel safe in my own home. I welcomed people into my home, and this is what happened. We no longer invited people to our house. If the boys had birthday parties, we would do them somewhere else. And that stress took its toll on my son. I wouldn't let him make a mess. Used to, I'd say it's okay to make a mess just as long as he clean it up. I'm a painter sometimes, and I make messes. When I quilt, I make messes. When I craft, I make messes. That's just part of life. That's part of the fun of being a creative person. So if my boys dumped out all their toys in the middle of the floor, I didn't care, because that's part of being creative and having fun. At the end of the day, though, we got to pick those things up and get them clean. So that was our thing. But my son lost a few of his toys because he didn't want to keep them cleaned up. So we just bagged them up and put them in our storage shed for a little bit during this time. What this woman did to me took my boys' mother away from them, and the mother they were used to. My husband and I started making plans to fix up our old house. We had already had plans, to fix it up. I mean, we'd only been living there, 3 or 4 years, It takes time to save up money, especially when you're barely getting by. But after she did what she did, this church lady, the house was tainted. You know, even if I fixed it up, it would never be the same. No matter how much money we spent or whatever, that stigma would still be there. That house was part of my childhood. It was my godparents' house. I mean, and when the house was built, it had an outhouse. That tells you how old the house was. It was no longer a safe place. I got to thinking about my godparents, and they wouldn't want me to live like that. So my husband and I got the idea that we would move. We would either build a new house or get a mobile home, something. So here's where the Lord comes in. We couldn't afford 2 mortgages, so we had to we were trying to sell the house we were in. The excuse from this lady was, the church lady was saying, I was just doing my job. Well, it wasn't her job. She did not come to my home as a social worker. She came to my home as a friend and betrayed me. She came to my home as a so-called Christian to show me compassion and love. But that's not what she did. It was not part of her job to go to my church where I grew up and tell everyone all the things that she did. That was gossip. And she bore false witness. It was not part of her job to slander me the way she did. It was not part of a social worker's job to... They're supposed to maintain, and from my experience with dealing with social workers now, they're supposed to maintain a certain amount of keep certain things private. We're not supposed to discuss things. They're supposed to protect our privacy. If she truly wanted to help me, well, she would have come to me in a discreet way. What she did was based solely on her opinion. I could have made a big scene at church to humiliate her. I could have slugged her. That wouldn't have accomplished anything. All I could do was keep repeating that Bible verse in my head. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And she had a little girl of her own, and I felt sorry for her. This woman needed professional help. She had OCD. She was totally obsessed with clean. She did something to someone else at church, a similar incident. And people started questioning things at this point. They started seeing her for who she was. And then we actually did have somebody come back and apologize and say, I'm so sorry, I believed what she said. There was another friend of ours at church that she went into their home. She didn't call DHR on her because she didn't have kids. But she went back to church and said things because she got some mud on her floor. I mean, it had rained and we lived in the country. We live in a very rural area here. This woman had a little dirt on her floor, and the church lady had something to say about it. So there are people that did apologize to my husband. They never apologized to me. I never got an apology from her or anybody else. We stuck it out at church there for 2 more years after this incident. And then we started going to church somewhere else. At the end of that 2 years was when we were able to move into our new house, the house we live in now. One of the biggest things I learned from this, and like I said, I didn't realize at the time what spiritual warfare was. If I had, I might have handled it differently. I might have handled a whole lot of things differently in my life if I had known about spiritual warfare. But I come to realize not everyone that goes to church are saved. Not everyone inside the doors of that church is a Christian. And I'm not going to run. I'm just not built that way. I don't run. And so when this woman did what she did, I was not going to cower away like a guilty person. I walked in there with my head held high because I knew I didn't do anything wrong, and I was not going to walk away in shame. We did eventually leave that church, but it was 2 years later. And then we eventually came back. So that'll be something for a future story. But I don't go to church for the people in it. I do have friends now that it's good to fellowship with and those things. But I go to church because that's a place of worship. That's where you connect. It's supposed to be a place where you can connect and get help. And I know everybody calls people in church hypocrites. But the fact is, every single human being on this planet has been a hypocrite at one time or another. If you're a person that smokes and you tell your kid not to smoke while you got a cigarette in your hand, you're a hypocrite. You don't have to go to church to be a hypocrite. Okay? If you're got a drinking problem, you ever been an alcoholic and you're telling your kid don't start drinking, and you still got a beer in your hand, that's being a hypocrite, you know? There's different ways to be a hypocrite. You don't have to go to church to be one. But the point of going to church is that's where we worship. That's where we show the Lord our faithfulness. That's where we learn. We go there to hear God's word. And yes, you can do those things at home. I'm not saying you can't. But for my children, going into those classes and learning Bible study, learning how to find those books in the Bible, they learn so much at church. They intermingled with other people. So it was important for my kids to be there as well. And I made that choice that what they needed was more important than my pride or my feelings. So I just bit my tongue and got through it. And like I said, vengeance belongs to the Lord. He is my defender. And things have come a long way since then. There's a follow-up to the church lady, if you will, where we can now see her and speak to her and be nice. And I found out later that she was not saved, and she got saved sometime during that time we were gone from the church. So she's gone through a lot. She's had to deal with a lot on her own, and she's mellowed out a lot. So the Lord did some work in her life to flip it. I don't trust her. I wouldn't invite her over for dinner ever again or anything like that. But I have forgiven her. I can speak to her. I can be cordial and all those things without allowing her a foothold back into my home. So anyway, if I think of anything else, I can put it in later.